that'll be shown on your certificate.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah, that works out. Thank you. Yeah, I'll let them know right
absolutely.
now. Mhm.
And I'm just going to keep on letting people in, but I'm going to, for the time being, I'm going to mute everybody so that we can all hear Darcy, um, our presenter today. And if you have questions, put that in the chat. I'll try to monitor that for you, Darcy. So if we have questions pop up, we can do that in
Perfect.
a relevant time space. And without further ado, I will introduce Miss Darcy Taggart.
Hello, everybody. I'm Darcy. I work for Seven County Services here in Louisville
Ah,
and have for a really long time. Um, and I'm a registered play therapist and a licensed counselor. And this training sort of came about because as I was talking to some of my clinicians, who do play therapy, and often we have a lot of families that use your interpretation services and use interpreters for play therapy sessions. It occurred to me that just because we know what we're doing in session doesn't necessarily mean you come in as an interpreter and have any idea what play therapy is or why people are doing what they're doing. And so I thought, well, maybe it would be helpful just to give a little bit of basic background on play therapy and what you might see in some sessions, and also just to be available to answer any questions. That's really my hope, is that if questions come up, or if you're like, hey, I was doing this session and this clinician was doing this really strange thing, and I have a question about it, that I can help to identify some things just to make us better partners with you all in the work that you do and bring to our clientele, because we couldn't do the sessions that we do with our families that don't speak English if we didn't have you helping us to interpret what we're doing and what we're saying to families. And so wanted to bring some of that information to you all and just to be a resource. I did create some very basic slides, and I am going to pull those up right now so that I can share those with you all. And then,
I just made you the host.
oh, perfect. That probably will be helpful in me figuring out how to share this with you all. All right. So I'm going to share this and start this slideshow from the beginning. I was messing with it earlier. So, um, just some real play therapy basics. I am originally an art therapist by original licensure. Came into the field of play therapy as most clinicians do after getting my license and started doing play therapy. I also do the early childhood mental health program. So it's one of the reasons I'm passionate about play, is that play is the language of kids, especially younger kids, and that often we can do in play and help teach in play things that we can teach them faster than we could when we're just doing traditional talk therapy, which is something that a lot of people do with older kids, but I get asked to do a lot with younger kids, and I say, I don't do that because 4-year-olds don't understand. Not that they don't understand, but they're not going to get as much out of me just sitting and talking to them as they are around us doing play in sessions. So I'm hoping that I can give you guys just a real basic introduction to play therapy and the kind of two different things and some of the activities that you might see therapists doing. And again, if you have questions that come up, please feel free to put them in the chat. If we have more questions, that's our other plan, is that today I can give some basic information. And then when you go, hey, I really want to know more about this or about this or about this, that next week's Wednesday afternoon session will be sort of developed based on questions and comments from this week's session. So while it is sort of a part two next Wednesday, it's going to be a little more of a like, let's see what it is that I didn't answer or what else you want to know about, and we'll go from there. All right, so I'm going to go over some just of the basic concepts of and rationale for play therapy. This is actually a video. Hold on, I'm going to pause it for a second because I just realized I may or may not have shared my sound with you. Going to reshare and share the sound because otherwise you won't be able to hear it. This is a video that came up from the Association for Play Therapy, which does A lot of the major training that we do around the country is the Association for Play Therapy, and all registered play therapists have done usually about 150 hours of additional certification CEs for play therapy. But this is kind of their just real basic commercial that begins talking about why we do play therapy. To make sure you can hear it. Oh, hold on. Did I mess it up? Oh, there it comes. Can you see it? Is my screen sharing? Okay, see, I was like, I don't think it's doing it. I was like, something is not right.
The next thing I knew,
Now can you see it? Okay, thank you. I'm going to start it over again. Somebody give me, Liliana, will you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it too?
Oh, hey, Andrew, how was school today?
well, it was a very frustrating day. Tommy was teasing me about my haircut, and that was embarrassing. As a way of coping with my embarrassment, I became angry. I'm ashamed to admit it, dear mother, but I could not resist striking Tommy with my fist. While this act of emotional release did offer a moment's respite from my embarrassment, the victory was short-lived. The next thing I knew, Tommy had immobilized me with a headlock and gave me what is referred to colloquially as a swirly.
This isn't how kids communicate, but they do communicate in other ways. Play is a child's first language. When a child plays, they express thoughts and feelings that would otherwise remain hidden. That's why play therapy can be a powerful tool for addressing a child's cognitive, behavioral, and emotional challenges. Licensed mental health practitioners use play therapy to help children process their experiences and develop more effective strategies for managing their world. To learn more about play therapy and registered play therapists, visit a4pt.org.
Oh,
I really just needed chocolate milk on the rocks and a long soak in the tub.
All right. So that is the basic definition of play therapy and why we do play therapy. Play is a child's first language. This is the official and long and what I feel like is very wordy definition of play therapy that the Association of Play Therapy talks about. But it's really just a therapeutic model of treatment that we use to help kids express all sorts of things, help kids learn coping strategies, help kids learn regulation strategies, and this is just my own opinion as a therapist who uses play therapy, I think it's fun to be able to do. And kids come in and then they go, oh, this therapy thing is kind of fun, even though my parent probably dragged me here. And I probably didn't necessarily think it would be super great to come to therapy. It makes the therapy process more engaging for kids when we utilize toys and other methods to be playful in sessions. This is, and I like this model or this kind of thing. This is something that Association for Play Therapy developed several years ago to show the therapeutic powers of play. That the research that they've done has shown that play sort of has these four main powers or four main components: that it facilitates communication, fosters emotional wellness, enhances social relationships, and increases personal strengths. So when I'm talking to a parent, and really I hope that our clinicians are good at explaining this to parents, which I know for many of our parents when we're working with you all as interpreters, this then also comes in to the explanation for you all helping us explain that to families, that really what we do with play therapy is all of the things that parents come into us for. They may come in and say, I feel like this kid needs help with their peer interactions, or they're struggling in school, or they're having a hard time regulating their feelings and they need more coping strategies for that. Or they're not getting along within their family. They need more attachment and better supports in the family unit. They need to manage stress better or work on fear or positive emotional regulation. And all of those things are things that play in general can help us to do for kids. And so I use this document a lot. We use it both for our documentation for play therapy, but also when talking with families about what play can do and why we might use play in session, because I think many times my families come in and they don't completely understand why I'm down on the floor playing with kids, doing the things that we're doing. And it's kind of like, I thought you would just come in and tell my kid to stop doing the things that they're doing, or say, here's what you can do to cope better. But if I learn that through play, it takes a lot less repetitions of that information in order to build a new pathway in my brain. And so the therapeutic powers of play is something I go back to both with clinicians and with my families to talk about why we do it and why play therapy can be helpful and can work. Some of the research on play being how kids communicate allows kids to make sense of complicated emotions and to gain mastery and understanding over difficult experiences. That comes from Piaget's work back done in the 60s, that it's a healthy part of development for kids, and that the toys are the words that they use, and the language of children is play. I think it provides that opportunity to bridge abstract with concrete experiences. So the ability to sort of go, I'm struggling with this concept. I don't know what to do about it. But as I experience it in play, I problem solve. I come up with ideas of how to communicate better, of how to express my feelings, or maybe I play out a scenario that's happening to me at school, and we come up with all sorts of possibilities of things that we could do to work on that experience. The other thing is that play is a way for kids to learn those sort of basic social skills. So if I have a kid that comes along and the parent comes into us and says, this kid has been aggressive, or this kid has been hitting other kids at school, right? That I can go, okay, so this tells me this kid does not have a skill that they need in order to engage with other individuals. And I could just tell them, oh, hey, this is the skill. But if we practice that skill in play, if I say, oh, you wanted to borrow that toy from me. When you want to borrow a toy, reach out and go, toy please, or turn please, or something like that, right? Or even just gestures, because a lot of times when we're doing play therapy across a language barrier, or when there's two different languages and the therapist speaks one and the child speaks another, play can also help communicate lots of things through gestures, through pointing, through engaging, through learning different kinds of words. I was in a session with a therapist the other day with a child who speaks Spanish. Therapist speaks English. I speak English. Neither one of us knows Spanish, and we did not have an interpreter in that session. But during the session, still, we're able to engage in playful interactions, back and forth communication, figuring out different things that the child was needing, and that we were kind of needing. Kid was learning some things. It was really fun to see. And even with play, that play can sometimes be a language that doesn't necessarily need specific words. But if you were in a session and you were watching a therapist do play therapy, or the therapist was saying things in play therapy, sometimes it feels strange because it feels like the therapist is maybe just describing what the kid is doing. And that is part of play therapy, because it's helping kids have the language for that too. Oh, you wanted this. You pointed to this. You wanted this. And so that is part of the way that we facilitate that communication in play therapy. There's two different kind of camps in play therapy. Child-led, which is really where we let the kids lead. It's called non-directive play therapy, and directive play therapy, where a therapist might give a specific task for the child to do. I feel like probably directive play therapy, when it comes up in sessions, feels a little more concrete than child-directed. So I want to talk a little bit about what you might see in a non-directive play therapy session. So when we talk about child-led, the reason we might let the kid sort of lead the session, not necessarily meaning the kid gets to do whatever they want, because we're still going to set some limits and boundaries, but it means I'm not necessarily going to specifically attempt to provide an intervention. Like I'm not going to say today we're going to play a game, or today we're going to talk about coping skills, or today we're going to do this specific task. I'm just going to accept the child, see what they're directed towards, follow their lead, get out the toys that they're interested in, and we're going to use that child's ability to solve problems or to communicate back and forth in the session, to establish a relationship and to really work on some of those skills. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to say today we're playing with dinosaurs. If the kid's interested in playing with the building blocks, we're going to work on all of the skills we're working on by playing with the building blocks, and they're going to get to choose that. Child directed also utilizes some specific facilitated responses. And to me, this is maybe where it doesn't feel as specific about whether or not I interpret that. So if a therapist is tracking, so maybe just saying, wow, you are drawing with the blue crayon, or you are using the dinosaurs to attack the other dinosaurs, right? That's tracking. And that in a session, if I'm saying that, then ultimately I want the interpreter that I'm working with to also say that to the child, to make sure that that tracking or that response gets sent across that barrier to the child. Responding to and reflecting feelings. So I might say, "Oh, your face is doing this. You seem frustrated." Or your face is doing this. You seem really sad. And maybe a kid is going to reflect back to me that they do feel sad, but maybe they're like, no, I feel a different way. But I'm responding to and reflecting the feelings that I see on a kid's face during session, or during play. I might be utilizing a respond or reflective feelings to say, like, it, you seem sad that your mom had to go back out to the lobby, or you seem frustrated by that thing that happened with your friend at school. And so I'm responding to what I'm seeing and reflecting the feelings that I see on their face. Usually with younger kids, I will try to say what I see their face doing, because I feel like it helps a younger child to start to be able to really also see that, right? Like, and if they say, no, I don't feel sad, I feel mad, then they can maybe understand, oh, okay, well, your face was doing this, which is what made me think that. But you're telling me you feel angry. Okay, let's talk about feeling frustrated. What could we do different? Self-esteem building. So not just comments like good job or way to go, but really tracking like what kids are able to do. So noticing, I notice that you are working really hard on building that block tower so tall. So I'm giving them the noticing of what they're capable of doing, as opposed to just giving them like a labeled praise or telling them that I like what they're doing. I'm more noticing and responding to what it is that they're doing and to their power and control to do that. Returning responsibility and decision making really looks like if a child asks me a question or a child points to something and I feel like maybe they want to get that thing that they're pointing to, then I might be saying, oh, you wanted the orange blocks. You can say, block, please, and give them the power to do that, to returning that responsibility to do that. Or if a kid says, what do you think I should draw next? Being able to return that decision making to them. You're wondering what to draw. I'm noticing you are good at making decisions. You get to decide in this office what you draw. And so that might feel, right? I feel like that's sometimes one of those things that a lot of times with parents, they will question, why did you do that? Why didn't you just say, oh, I would love for you to draw an orange kite? And part of that is that I want to empower the child to be able to start making their own decisions and to be able to take responsibility. It also might mean that if they make a mistake in a session, instead of getting frustrated with that mistake, we might say, oof, whew, the water got spilled on the floor. I'm wondering what we could do about that and return that responsibility of decision making back to the kid instead of just jumping in and solving the problem. Reflecting content is really just about saying to kids what I see them doing. So I'm noticing that you are putting the orange block on top of the blue block. I'm noticing that you are drawing the bear purple today. I'm noticing that you are doing whatever it is that the child is doing. So I'm reflecting the content of that. In true non-directive play therapy, people would not make a connection between the content they're seeing in play and what they know about the child. But most of our therapists will probably not stay super true to that reflecting content. And they might say, I'm noticing that the kids are having a fight with each other. And I'm remembering that you had a fight with your friend at school earlier today, if that's something that I know. So I might reflect the content and make connections to the content that I know about the child. Facilitating creativity. So I want to make sure that my responses are increasing a child's ability to be creative with the materials or creative with what they're interested in, or to try something new if that's something that they never have done before, to build the relationship, to make sure that we are kind of creating that positive, engaged relationship, and to enlarge the meaning. So enlarging the meaning kind of goes into what I was talking about with reflecting content and enlarging that to something that I already know about a kid, or to enlarge the meaning, like they say, this is blue, and I might say, yeah, that's a blue tower, or yes, that's a blue duck. So that I'm enlarging the meaning of what it is that the child is saying to increase and interpret an understanding of some of that. These facilitated responses, while it might just feel like the therapist is using tons and tons and tons of words, are part of sort of what they're doing to facilitate back to those therapeutic powers of play, helping with coping strategies. Or, wow, you really did that. You figured it out for yourself. Now I'm building self-esteem and I'm helping kids empower themselves to know that they can try something new. It also keeps the therapist really present in the session and not sort of dissecting stuff. If a parent is in session, I usually will invite the parent into the play as well. But sometimes I will wait for a kid to invite their parent into the play. Or I might say, do you want mom or dad or grandma or Aunt Susie or whoever it is that is in session with the kid? Would you like them to play with us too? Or do you want them just to watch? Most of the time, kids will want them to play as well, but a lot of times I will have had a conversation with a parent ahead of time about comfort level with that, what my thoughts are, why I want to invite them into play. And that while play can also be a time for educating colors, numbers, shapes, letters, things like that, in therapy, we really don't use play for academic education and more for social emotional education around feelings and coping strategies and problem solving skills. With that. Directive play therapy is more therapist led. So it might be that I am going to select an activity that the child might have some control in it. They might have some choices in it. I might say, do you want to do this activity or this activity? But I'm still sort of offering the two that I'm comfortable with that day. Sometimes that might be a board game. It might be a sandbox. It might be playing in a dollhouse. It might be building things with blocks or Legos or any of those kinds of things are all often therapist led when the therapist is bringing that into the session. Usually people will develop rapport with these facilitated responses and child-directed play. That's where they'll build a relationship before they move into doing more therapist-led activities. And then we want people to know like what interventions they provide are going to be kind of informed by what we know about the kid, our relationship status with the kid, their age, what we know they're capable of. I usually tell clinicians to be sort of prepared with 2 or 3 options. So if you are in a session and you see a clinician say, today we're going to do this, and the kid's sort of not at all engaged or interested, they might switch to a second or third option that they have in their pocket of something else that they have developed or brought with them to think about that. Therapist-led activities bring a little more structure to a play therapy session. Also, if we're working on parent-child relationship things going on in session, if that's maybe what one of their treatment goals is to empower the parent and the child in their relationship, then I might provide therapist-led activities that really get the parent and child interacting together. But also to help both parent and child be able to have some control in some of that, because part of that goal with parent-child relationship is to let the kid have some control within some of that, but also maintain the parent's standard of control as well. So I wanted then to bring you guys some activities, things that you can do in non-directive. With child-led, sorry, I'm going back, let's go back a little bit. In child-led activities, then the toys and materials are not as much important as the therapist is. Really, whatever toys and materials we're using, my ability to use those facilitated responses is more important than the actual task that we choose. We're going to make sure that anything we offer in our office spaces is going to be reflective of the clientele that we serve and the kids that are in our office. We are always open if there is something that you feel like if from a cultural perspective that maybe I might not know that would be helpful to that, or that you feel like if you've hey, this would be helpful to have, because in our stand, like thinking about stand trays specifically, we try to have different things to represent different cultures and different clients that we serve. And so if there was ever something you were like, hey, it might be helpful if you had this or that. We're always open to suggestions of additional things that might be helpful to support culture of families that we are working with. If you knew some of those things, that would be helpful. So the toys and materials, the important part of it is that we provide a variety of toys and materials. And most people would say games are not child-led, although if I get out a game and I say, how do you want to play this game? That can be child-led. But most games come with preset rules, and those would be more therapist-led than they are child-led. Some directive play activities might include board games, Candyland, cooperative games, really anything that we play in a session should have some rationale behind it. So even when I'm playing Uno with a child, if I'm playing a game of cards, maybe we're working on turn taking, maybe we're working on being able to accept disappointment or stress tolerance, or being able to accept a limit that somebody is giving them. So there might be lots of different reasons why we're doing a certain activity with a family in order to be able to engage with that child, engage with that family member. We might be doing ones on family interactions and what those family interactions are. I can turn almost any game into some sort of therapeutic game. There are specific games that are like meant to be therapeutic or meant to be cooperative. But if I play Candyland, where every red square you land on, we have to talk about something that makes us feel angry, and every blue square we land on, it's something that makes us feel sad, or every green square is practicing a coping strategy that I could use to calm down when I'm feeling frustrated, then I've turned that game into something that's more therapeutic than just playing Candyland. Sometimes just playing Candyland can be therapeutic if turn taking, accepting limits, things like that was something the child works on. It really depends on what the goals of the child are and what the goals of the family are, and how I'm going to use those directive play activities. Creative activities are directive play, so that might be utilizing the sandbox. I'm sure you guys have been or may have been in sessions where a sandbox is used. So utilizing a sand tray, maybe I'm setting up a story in the sand to tell about something that happened with my family this week, or maybe I'm setting up um, a thing in the sand to tell you about how I'm feeling that day. Or maybe I'm setting up just a picture of my family to tell you about some things that are going on in the family. Genograms, which is one of the words there. Genograms is when I really look at like who are the dynamics of the people in the family. And so when I'm doing that playfully, I might have kids choose an animal to be each member that lives in their house. And then we might talk about why they chose the tiger to be so and so and the gorilla to be so and so, or what made them think of that person with that. Feelings Rainbow, Color Your Heart are really creative feelings activities where kids might come up with coping strategies for different feelings based on different colors, or color in a heart on a piece of paper with how much of a certain feeling they're feeling today. So if yellow stands for happy and red stands for angry and blue stands for sad, then I might say, how happy are we feeling? Is that most of the heart that's feeling that way? Is there a little teensy tiny percent of the heart that's feeling happy? Is the rest of it feeling sad or mad? Okay, now I can talk about what are those feelings and what's been going on that's caused those feelings in creative activities. Painting, drawing, anything that involves craft supplies is also creative play therapy activities. And then role playing is sort of acting out, doing what comes next, practicing communication skills. I also might, in role playing games, I might have them pretend to be the parent or pretend to be the other kid in the situation, and I might play the kid. Or I might say, okay, who do you want me to play? You be you, and I'm going to be Susie from your class that you're having a hard time with. What would Susie say? Right? Um, so all of those types of things can be directive activities, but also set up obstacle courses, or I've set up things in the hallway for kids to be able to practice getting their wiggles out and calming their body back down, utilizing sort of up-regulated experiences and down-regulated experiences to be able to practice some of the skills that we're using in our session. Another directive one that I feel like we use a lot over at Seven Counties is we have like Jenga games or memory matching games where kids then are answering specific questions when they pull out a block or when they make a match, or they are identifying a certain feeling or practicing a certain coping strategy. All of those kinds of things can be utilized in directive play therapy activities. And some other things that I put on here. So using puppets might be one of the things we do. Most of the time, I think most of our staff have puppets that are animals and creatures and sometimes people, to act out a specific conversation or to get kids talking. My experience with puppets is when I pull a puppet out, kids are more likely to talk to the puppet than they are to me sometimes, especially if they're younger. And I think that's hilarious because it's clearly my hand inside the puppet, but they oftentimes will have a conversation with Joe the puppet over here that they won't necessarily tell me. And so then it gives us a chance to kind of have that distance, or they have a puppet and I have a puppet and we're having a conversation. And that can sometimes be helpful. Did a lot of puppet work over COVID when we were doing things virtually. And being able to have to, do something online, because that was a way for us to be able to have conversations and discuss things that sometimes provides a little bit of space from the actual problem itself. The child doesn't feel so put on the spot because now it's just Joe and Susie having a conversation over here. And they might be a bear and an axolotl, and they're having the conversation instead of the child and I having that conversation directly. Do a lot of acting out of fairy tales or stories that are similar to something going on with the child. I might do that with puppets, but I might maybe find a therapeutic story or something to read and then let the kid think about what the child in the story should do, especially if it's a problem that the child themselves is having, because then it empowers the child to come up with some ideas and some thoughts about things that they can do in order to maybe solve that problem. And once we've got that maybe in that sort of external capacity, then we can kind of go, this reminds me of that problem you're having. And so I'm wondering if maybe that's something you feel like you could do. Let's practice what you might say to that other kid. And let's work through sort of those things. And if a kid doesn't know what they would say, then I might be willing to give an idea. But I'm always going to ask, would you like an idea of something that we could do? Would you like an idea of something that you could use with that peer, or how you might say it? Okay, let's practice it. Pretend I'm so-and-so, and you're saying that to me. Obstacle courses are often things we do to work on self-regulation. So something that we could do, I'm going to speed up and slow down the activities that I do so that I'm working helping kids to be able to transition between faster experiences and slower experiences. And that's something we get a lot of kids that struggle with those transitions, moving from a high energy activity to a lower energy activity. So helping kids to be able to practice that in session. We talked about reversing roles, reading books, relaxation poses. I call them relaxation poses because I am not a yoga instructor, but a lot of them are yoga poses, something to move my body, work on taking deep breaths, work on helping kids to be able to regulate to someone else. So co-regulation. Whenever I stay regulated in session or I am trying to work on my own breathing, then often kids will be able to work on that too. Songs about you include something where we're gonna make up a song. Often I use something that feels like a song they might know, and then we change the words to it to tell about that child. So the things they're good at, the things I notice they like, the things I notice they're working hard on, the things we're working on in session. Sometimes if we set something to music, then it can help kids to be able to kind of remember that a little bit easier. Tag, bounce, catch, empty and fill games, any of those things are other things. I don't play a ton of running tag in my office because my office is tiny, but we might do some of those things if we're doing outdoor activities. Bounce, catch, empty fill is like just taking things in, putting things back. Shape sorters, any of that kind of stuff is empty fill games. Hide things, hide and seek. Hide and seek really in a therapy setting is often about the kid feeling found or feeling seen, as opposed to actually about the game of hide and seek. Because again, if you hide under my desk, I'm going to find you because there's not that many places to actually hide in the office. But it's really about the looking and about the relationship building that happens in hide and seek. Hiding objects has a lot more to do about attention and focus and helping kids to be able to really hone in their attention to find the things that have been hidden around the office. Telling stories and letting kids supply missing words or giving them a task of something to build a machine that would make homework easier, build a machine with your Legos that would allow you, or build a magic wand and then figure out what you would do with that magic wand if you could do something like that. So those are definitely some different types of activities. As far as like interpretation goes, my experience with that, and that one of the reasons I want to do it is basically just if there's questions, if you're like, hey, I don't know what you're doing, clinicians are usually happy to answer that. If it feels like if you get pushback on that, let me know, because I like to make sure I want my clinicians to be able to answer what they're doing and what's going on and why they're doing it, because I think that makes it easier for you to interpret it to the families or to the children. If you understand what is going on and what the rationale is behind that. But also that if something doesn't feel like it's translating, to be able to say, hey, I'm not like that one doesn't feel like it's translating, or there's not a word for that, or there's not I'm not necessarily getting what it is. If therapists need to slow down their facilitated responses, that's okay to ask. I definitely think that might be something. I feel like what happens in play therapy is therapists get very used to doing this sort of constant dialogue, and that can get too much dialogue. So if it feels like, oh, that's too much and we need to be able to slow it down, we would love feedback on that. And yeah, and if there's ever something that is like, I'm wanting to understand more about kind of why we're doing what we're doing, there's some rationale for that. What I hear from therapists is, that if there is something, because sometimes kids will be like, they're confused or the parent is confused, and that you can ask for more clarification if it looks like, even from the parent's perspective, or break in and say, wait, I need to tell you this thing that the parent said. All of that we're happy for you guys to do those things, especially in play therapy activities. Something else I would think about that is that, like, if it is child directed, if you just see a therapist doing that, just interpret exactly what they say, even if it feels kind of strange or kind of weird, that they're doing that, then go with it. And if it needs clarification, ask for it. I feel like that is my main stuff for right now, is just a really basic understanding of sort of what we do. But I would love to answer some questions if people have questions today, or if there's things you want to know about next week, let me know so that I can make sure that we are doing what it is that you guys need in providing this. If there's general mental health questions, I'm happy to answer those too. Not just about play therapy.
Darcy, thank you so much for this.
Of course.
As I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, you're welcome to bring yourself off mute right now to ask if you like, or drop that in the meeting chat. As I mentioned before, as Darcy mentioned before, she's going to be using some of the questions that you guys have to kind of fine tune how she presents next week's session, to make sure that we get, the information that you need to you.
And I would also love next week if there has been a specific situation in a session that you've been in, whether it's at Seven Counties or whether it's somewhere else. I might know more about Seven Counties things than I do about other places, but yeah, feel free to shoot me that too and go, here was the scenario, here's what it felt like was happening. Do you have any thoughts or clarification about that? Happy to do it.
That's helpful. Okay.
Right this second. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any specific
Yeah, there's
questions
nothing
in the
new.
chat, so that was helpful.
Again, part 2 is going to be next Wednesday at noon Eastern time. And if you registered for today's meeting, you are automatically registered for next week's. Sylvia asks, how hard is it to apply
Oh,
all these techniques with an autistic child?
that is
Great
a
question.
really excellent question, Sylvia. So I find play therapy to be really helpful with kids on the autism spectrum. Um, it it sometimes looks a little different because I am going to be utilizing, like, there's a whole model of play therapy called AUT play, AUT, like autism, AUT play, that is around utilizing play therapy with kids and individuals on the autism spectrum, and really looking at sort of some of those hallmarks of autism, that socialization is usually a little bit of a struggle, communication, and regulation, emotional regulation. And so really kind of sticking with those three camps. Usually my experience, I think a lot of my clinicians that work with especially younger kids on the spectrum do a lot more child directed or that child led, because it it's a little bit easier, because always sometimes there's a language barrier that's not like we speak different languages, but this child is non-speaking and they don't speak much at all. And so then I might be doing play therapy with fewer words and more gestures, with the idea, if the child has speech, even a little bit of speech, that I'm going to build on that with communication. I had a kid, I still see this kid, so I talk about him a lot. He's 13 now. He started seeing me when he was 3, and he said 2 words. He said shark, and he could say ah, which usually was someone being chased by a shark. And so we started there and we did a lot of play. And now the kid comes in and talks a blue streak and has an online game that he's created about sharks. Not surprising, because that's definitely his interest. So when I'm talking to clinicians or when I'm doing that, I will tend to focus my interactions or my interventions around something that child already likes. that is one of the ways I think it's a little different with kids on the spectrum, is that if I know they love sharks, we're going to play with a lot of sharks. And we're going to do all this stuff by utilizing and offering the tool that the child is really interested in. I had a kid that did cars all the time. Everything I've ever learned about The Walking Dead, I learned from one of my kids that was super into that show that I have never seen, but could tell you the whole plot line of, because everything we did, we put into scenarios like, okay, well, if this was happening in The Walking Dead, what would we do? That was an older kid. Um, so I think that's one of the main differences with play therapy with kids on the spectrum is that we are going to do a lot more maybe targeted to their interests, because I'm going to get a lot more buy-in if I am doing the thing they're interested in or playing with the thing that they're interested in, than I am if I'm trying to always be like, okay, you do my thing. I also think I offer a lot more choices with kids on this. I offer choices with every kid, to be honest, but especially with my kids on the spectrum, because so many of them have that like pervasive drive for autonomy. And I think some of that comes from there not being a lot of their own autonomy in the community, because people assume that they can't do things. And so then they're not given that opportunity. And so making sure that we give opportunities. And I probably pull parents in a lot more with kids on the spectrum. Whereas I feel like, not that I have parents in my office almost all the time if kids are under the age of 5, but with older kids, I also sometimes will pull parents in more because I want to help the parent and the child navigate some of those social disconnects that come so that they can go out into the community and navigate them on their own. But yeah, I think it works really beautifully with that. And I could definitely pull some resources on autism, specifically, and play therapy with that too.
We have another question in the chat,
Sure.
Darcy, from Richard Rand. I work with Spanish interpreting, but I do have limited ASL skills and deaf friends. I'm curious, though, how the same question would be posed regarding the autistic child. Would it pertain to working with a deaf child? I'm sorry.
It would. It would. I would say, um, in the deaf community, I've had some folks attend trainings actually with me who work with the deaf population, and then I ask them a lot of questions back of saying, how do we make sure that we do this appropriately? So I do want to make sure that I'm doing more, not necessarily gaining eye contact, but gaining attention, like that I am making sure that I am gaining attention when I'm sharing information with a child or a parent. Because I think in the deaf community, I can't just assume that they're going to hear all of those facilitated responses. So I might use more gestures, things like that. Now, I don't know ASL. I also say that, I would love to learn it, but I don't know it. So I would want to make sure that we had interpreters in those sessions to make sure that we do that. But that also we might be using more, and this goes for kids on the spectrum too, we might use more picture references. We might use more visuals to make sure that our meanings and our understandings getting across, especially if it's a young child who maybe doesn't have sign yet. Parent does, but younger child doesn't. Now, if it's the parent, the child's not deaf, but the parent is deaf, I want to make sure I have an interpreter so that anytime what I'm saying is getting sent to the parent. If the child is, I want to make sure that I'm utilizing a lot more visuals and a lot more things like that for the kid to be able to make sure that we're gaining understanding. I also, anytime I have a kid that has like an assistive technology device, I want to make sure that I know how to use that and how to protect it in session with a kid, because sometimes they'll come to me and they have a device they use, but I don't know how to use it. And so a lot of them will be like, okay, mom, okay, dad, can you help me learn how to use this so that I make sure that I'm communicating with that kid in the way that feels most supportive to them. I'll
Thank
look
you
for
all.
some best practices stuff for next week too, for both of those.
Those are actually really great questions.
Absolutely.
Well, we have about 9 minutes left in the hour. If anyone has anything else they'd like to add or ask about at this time. If not, that's fine. definitely, as I mentioned before, I will send out a reminder again about next week's part 2 so that we can follow up to some more of this conversation. And then we will be issuing certificates of completion for this training once both sections have been finished. And of course, probably we'll put together a quick survey for you as well.
And if questions come up between now and next week, feel
Mhm.
free to, let me know, let Alyssa know. I think my email's on here somewhere. There,
Yay.
dtaggart@sevencounties.org. But also, if you're just like, oh, I have a general question or I want to send you a scenario, let me know. Happy to do all of that by next week.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Good to
Everyone
see
have
you
a
all.
great
Thanks for
day.
sharing your lunch hour with me.
Y'all have a great day. We'll see you again next week.
There we go.
Darcy, in the meantime, if questions should be sent to me, I'll make sure that I hold on to those or forward them
That
to you as
sounds
soon as
perfect.
possible. So
Sounds
you'll
great.
have, everything you need
And
to be
I'll
prepared.
at least include the 2 questions we had today with
Mhm.
some resources, and I'll probably find some other videos of watching it in action too.
Fantastic.
Might even see
Wonderful.
if I can find one of it being interpreted. We'll see what I can do.
Okay. Thank you again. This was really
No
great.
problem. Happy to do it. I'll see you all next week.
Take care.